evening, and thank you so much for being part of Joy Asonye Live this evening. As usual, we'll be talking about trending political stories around the world, but today we are coming to Nigeria. As you must have heard, President Bola Tinubu has unveiled the 27.5 trillion naira budget estimate for the 2024 fiscal year. The budget was presented to a joint session of the National Assembly on Wednesday, where it is currently undergoing scrutiny and deliberation for a final report, or approval rather. And today we'll be going into a breakdown of that budget. Does it really reflect the true nature of the country at the moment, economically speaking, of course? Would it address those very dire situations that Nigerians want it to? Well, that's what we'll be discussing, and in the studio to discuss all of that with me is our economic expert, or rather my economic expert. I miss him all the time for economic stories or an economic update. He is Mr. Akintunde Ogunsola. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with you again.
Yes, thank you. It's wonderful. This is the second time. Welcome. I think we should have some ceremony for the second time. Welcome to Joy Asonye Live.
Thank you.
We'll go for a very short break to return to discuss the issue at hand. President Bola Tinubu unveils a 27.5 trillion naira budget estimate. We'll be back after this. Okay, as excited as some people may be as the president presents this budget estimate, some people have criticized it. I'd just like to start with that. What was your impression when you saw the breakdown of the budget as it was presented by the president?
All right. When I saw the 27.5 trillion budget, and I saw that we're going to be having budget deficit again, I said, wow, so Nigeria is planning to go and borrow another money. So the borrowing will continue. We are still waiting and looking forward to the day that Nigeria will not have a budget deficit anymore. We know that borrowing is not sustainable. In fact, the current Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, also mentioned it, that the borrowing that the country is currently doing is not sustainable. We can no longer continue to borrow, paying debt year in, year out. Nigeria's debt to GDP ratio is actually very high, but yet we still need to borrow. But the little permissible good news is that, well, the borrowing this time is not as much as that of 2023. So possibly maybe we'll be seeing the downward trends of borrowing in subsequent years, hopefully.
Okay, let's talk about our debt to GDP ratio and the concerns several economic experts have had. You know, we have to be servicing this debt, and the very fact that our National Assembly has positioned itself to always approve it when the president asks, do you think that's where we should tackle it? Economic experts such as yourself, are you really engaging this National Assembly to say, when this president comes with another request for another tranche of borrowing, please, these are those things you should put into consideration?
Oh, yes. I think the National Assembly is aware about that. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, in his own remarks after the presentation of the budget, said the administration need to look into budget reforms, looking at how to reform our budgeting system in such a way that it will be easy for the government to generate revenue to finance the budgets rather than looking at borrowing all the time. Now, for us as experts, we have advised the politicians several times. We've made them to realize and made them to know that too much of borrowing is not good for us because it's actually affecting part of the borrowing is affecting our exchange rate, the naira to dollar exchange rate, is also part of what is affecting the interest rate and also the what do they call it now? The borrowing also affects the inflation rate. Inflation rate, yes, it also affects that. So to continue to borrow to finance our budget is actually not sustainable. Everyone knows. It's just like this subsidy talk. Yeah, the subsidy talk started gradually. The subsidy is not sustainable. The subsidy has to go at a point. everybody accepted, and all hands was on deck to see that subsidy was removed, and that was done. So I believe that maybe with time we'll also get to that point where we'll all realize that we can no longer borrow again. We just have to look inwards to see how we generate our revenue to finance the government expenditure for the fiscal year.
Okay, so to give it context, I just want you to give us what it means. I mean, Nigeria's debt accounted for 38.4% of the country's nominal GDP in June 2023, that's this year, compared with the ratio of 21.6% in the previous quarter. Nigerian government debt to GDP ratio is updated quarterly, but just give us an idea as to what it means for a layman like me. What does it mean? Does it mean we are good on borrowing? Because I've seen people say, oh, our debt to GDP is still at the stage where we can go again.
Oh, yes, that's the argument by some quarters that, oh, we've not borrowed to the maximum limit. But
what is the maximum limit?
The maximum permissible limit is at 45%. That's the maximum limit, 45% debt to GDP. But we mustn't get to that peak point where, because once we try to clinch that peak point, it will affect our currency, it will affect our economy. It means that we are borrowing more before we can be able to produce. Before our GDP can grow, we have to borrow as much as 45% of our total expenditures. That's what it means. Exactly. So if your total expenditure is, let's say, 100%, then you must borrow as much as 45% to augment your revenue. So it means that the government is not even making as much, to finance its expenditure. But as it is now, we have, even in the 2024 budget, most likely from the predictions and the estimations, we are looking at that debt to GDP ratio to be around 31% or 32%, which is, some quarters will argue that is still allowable, but if we can reduce it further, it's going to be a plus, it's going to be an achievement, it will improve our economy, it will also improve doing business in the country, it can be interpreted to mean that foreign direct investment has also increased. We have more multinational companies coming to Nigeria to invest into our economy, and that is what we want. That's the way to go. So government need to look at how to reduce it. Yes, we are not yet at the peak, but getting to the peak is also a very serious danger. So we also need to look at that. Okay,
but is it worrying that the debt servicing is expected to go up as much as 9.18 trillion naira? Out of that money?
Just like I said, for 2023 budget, the debt service was around 13 point
exactly. So this trillion. Is a reduction.
So it's a reduction, to 9.87 trillion or thereabout. So with that despite that there is a reduction, we are still going to borrow as much as that amount to finance our budget deficit. So it's like our debt is not even reducing. You are borrowing here and you are still paying back in the other end. So it's like the debt is still going to be sustained. Nigeria will still be owing, and then the borrowers, the World Bank, IMF, and others, we still be determining the economy of the country. And that's affecting our economy so much. Okay,
that renewed hope budget, as it was tagged, is focusing mainly on security, education, health, and poverty. There are some very key sectors that this administration wants to focus on. And when you hear that security, education, health, infrastructure, social development, poverty reduction, let's just go to poverty reduction, for instance. It's very vague to say poverty reduction at 534 billion naira. What does that say, really?
I don't think that's possible. I can even remember very vividly President Muhammadu Buhari in his speech was in the last 2 or 3 years. He said he wants to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty, and it's going to be 10 million for the next 10 years. Now he's no longer in government. So is the new government willing to continue with that? And what are the strategies to do that? So talking about the poverty reduction, poverty alleviation, the president mentioned cash transfers to the very poor and vulnerable in the society. The question is, how will this cash that they are just giving people be able to sustain them and remove them out of poverty, when the benchmark for measuring poverty is that people that cannot feed with $1 per day. So now if you convert...
Access to health is part of it.
Access to health too is also part of it. But I think the budget for health is about 5% of the total expenditure. So which
that's
is also
1.33 trillion.
Yes, which is also...
is that commendable if you have to put aside?
It's not sufficient, but at least I think is a little improvement from what it used to be in the past. So we can also commend them in that line. But talking about lifting people out of poverty, it is not just about sharing money, raw cash that will lift people out of poverty, but it's just to provide the enabling environment for people to thrive, for them to be able to go to farm, especially the rural people who are very poor. They need the conducive environment, they need the security to be able to go to farm, to produce, which will now also in turn boost our GDP. In fact, it might also lead to us exporting to other countries instead of just feeding them with cash, and then they get lazy, they're afraid of going to their farm, they can't go because they're afraid to be killed in the farm and all that. So the cash transfer might not really work. I think what the administration needs to do is to go back to the drawing table and see how they can redesign the poverty alleviation program and see how to create jobs for people. Creation of job is very key. Instead of giving them fish, it's better you teach them how to fish and then sustain themselves.
We screamed against this. I mean, I remember in the media, everybody's so against this conditional cash transfer. That's what it started.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to be getting to the ears of the government. This administration is following that same trend, even though the past administration failed woefully, in using that tool to bring people out of poverty and all of that.
Yeah.
So what do you think? This is a relatively new administration, but what do you think? Do you think Nigerians still trust that they know what they are doing? Because nobody would advise for a cash transfer when I can't even move my products from one place to the other without paying so much.
Nobody trusts that system, and I think even in the past government, we've seen that this aspect of the budget is like a pipeline for corruption to thrive.
Exactly.
We saw when COVID-19, was...
the reps are still investigating.
Up to now.
They are still investigating.
They said they were feeding children at home.
Just about the same amount that is going to be used, about over 500 billion was used to feed Nigerian children who were unfortunately at home because of the lockdown.
Yeah, so you see that it's actually a conduit pie for corruption. So, but I want to be optimistic that this administration will not go that line. They will actually sit down and look for genuine programs that they can use to put this money to support, starting up of businesses. If there are any youths in the country that want to start up a business, they can also give them soft loan from that fund. It's also part of poverty alleviation, giving small loans to business, to start up businesses, genuine businesses, not like the market money that they share another money and the which other one again.
That was the most ridiculous I had ever seen. I mean, even when the vice president at the time would go to the market and share to whom it may concern, and no accountability.
Exactly.
There was no data on who is getting what.
Exactly.
Oh,
the monies were not paid back.
They weren't. Would you? I mean, would you pay back?
So these are the issues. Government need to restructure or re-strategize when it comes to poverty alleviation, and I hope they will do that.
Okay, now let's move to education. So much has been said on our education sector, and a lot of young people have to leave the shores of the country for education tourism. Well, it's being paid so much. So much is being given to the education sector at the moment for a revamp. But would you see an impact, like appreciable impact? Because when you say education, health, 1.33 trillion naira, I mean, is it enough? Or would you see that impact necessary? Is this different from past administration's effort? What else can be done so that we see that revamped education sector?
Yeah, I think from what they have presented so far, I think it's better, you know, there's an improvement from the past. You know that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is somebody that has campaigned, you know, on that line. He has promised the youth that 4 years will be 4 years. I think it's kind of a slogan too now. He said 4 years will be 4 years, there will be no ASU strike. It's going to improve the infrastructures for the education sector, building more lecture theaters, you know, building more universities, federal universities are going to come up, and also providing more funds for research. Then the paramount is the student loan. That is also part of that breakdown.
Yes.
There's also going to be student loan. Students that cannot really afford to pay their school fees can opt for borrowings to finance their school fees, and then they get to pay. These are part of what the president has put in his manifesto, and I think immediately he came into office, he signed that act into the law. But be that as it may, we believe, we want to see that ASU will no longer go on strike. That is just the key. So that 4 years is going to be 4 years. So that students that are meant to spend short time in the school will not end up spending, you know, longer as they ought to be. And that is what is discouraging people from going to the public schools. It's not as if the public university and public schools don't have good teachers or lecturers. They have, you know, good teachers and lecturers, but at a point they started owing lecturers their salaries. They begin to go on strike. The classrooms are, you know, overcrowded. You know, you have as much as 50 to 100 students in one classroom. The furnitures are getting bad and no replacement. So these are the things, and it's part of the things ASU was also fighting for, to ensure that the facility for education is actually provided for, and the environment for learning is actually conducive. So with this budget, I hope and I believe that we'll see more facilities coming up. TED Fund is also there, UBEC. They have also made some provisions for them in order to ensure that these facilities you know, are actually in place for people to learn. So I believe it's better than before, and I hope that they are going to implement appropriately.
Okay, let's talk about the fact that the projection for next year, which is, by the way, in about 31 days time, is let's talk about the forex right now. The peg, the dollar peg at 750 naira per dollar. Would you find that very ambitious?
Oh yes, I find it very ambitious. And I also see that that government is not really planning to boost production and reduce importation. I was expecting the pegging to go a little bit lower.
Even lower?
Yes, because
the parallel market
this
right
administration met it at 450.
Right. That's these are the
2013 budget. I mean 2023 budget was 450. Yeah. And now they are coming to now peg it at 750.
Is it not more realistic? I mean, when you peg it at 450 and then before the end of the year, we're already seeing it at over 1,000 naira.
That's in the parallel market. In the I&E window, I think it's about 900 or thereabout. Potato.
Is still just as high. So, is it not too ambitious to ask it to even go lower? Because Nigerians are looking at that and saying, for crying out loud, at over 1,000 naira, not much is being done to ensure that it comes even lower. And I'm surprised you are saying you would have wanted it even lower.
Yeah, the reason is because government has made some promises to Nigerians. First of all, government promised that by December this year, which we are now, that production of petrol will be done locally, especially from the Port Harcourt refineries and also from Dangote refineries. So I just quickly put 2 and 2 together. I said, okay, if by December we begin to produce, and then NNPC GMD also came up and said, by June next year, we're going to stop importation of petrol.
We've heard several statements like that
so
before.
If government is actually sincere and they're actually, because budget is planning, if government is actually planning to stop importation next year, we will have seen it that, okay, the exchange rate will also go down. So, or possibly they just peg it at that so that they can have some excess crude accounts for them to push all the excesses there. But I just hope that the promises that they've made for us to begin to produce, not just fuel and energy, but also for us to begin to produce in the agricultural sector actually comes to pass.
No, but let's just still linger on that petroleum production.
Okay.
You seem very optimistic that you would actually see that production happen. Even the government doesn't seem as optimistic. I saw it.
That's what I'm saying. That yes. the government is not being optimistic. That's why they peg it at 750.
But in their defense, according to the government, we saw a recent headline about production to start December 2024. So if December 2024, you can understand why they might not even peg it at that within the year, that's the fiscal 2024 year.
Yeah.
So I can understand why they are not so optimistic. But the non-oil sectors, do you think this government has been intentional in trying, to energize it or provide that intentional policy framework that would make it functional and viable?
Oh yes, in some areas, me, I like measuring performance on percentage.
Right. Economists, I don't expect
I will not totally say they are not, and I will not totally say they are, because I'm seeing some moves. Government is actually investing, and they've created, I think they've created an agency under NIPDA to improve investment in information technology, because they know the teeming youth have this flair for this internet and ICT, tech savvy. So the government is actually trying to encourage the youth to invest in that line. And then there was an agency that is just created. I've forgotten the name now. It's off my head now. If I remember, I'll mention it. So this agency will help the youth to start up business in that line of technology. So I believe that with that, we're also we might be earning some forex from that side as well. But looking at creation of jobs generally, I think our economic policies are not too encouraging for investors. People that are doing businesses now are struggling to see that they actually make, in fact, that they just, break even before they even talk of making profit, so that they can remain in business. So doing business in Nigeria as we speak now is actually very high, because the cost of doing business is high. The cost of diesel is high. There's no power, adequate power is not there. You need to run diesel, you need to run petrol, which is very high. The cost of manpower is also going high, because subsidy has gone up, and everything is just going up. And then the turnover is not increasing the way it ought to. Because people are now also trying to, manage their funds. They are not ready to spend anyhow like that. So doing business is actually hard. So with that, I don't know how government will, maybe the plans they will put in place. And that's why I'm majorly after the production of petroleum products in Nigeria. Is very key, because that's the sector that Nigeria is actually rich in, this oil and gas.
Exactly.
Then I want to also talk about the production of oil per day, the projection. The government peg it at 1.8
something.
Yeah.
I can't remember. 1.83
million barrels per day.
Yeah.
I see that as being overambitious. Well, two ways also. They are overambitious in one way, because throughout 2023, I think it was just last week, which is ending of the year, we just arrived at 1.6.
Yeah, 1.6 million.
Yes, we just hit 1.6. It has been 1.2 and 1.3 within that range that we've been running. It even went lower earlier in the year, around April. It went lower to about 1,900,000 barrels per day. Whereas government planned in 2023 budget that it to be 1.8 million barrels per day. So we have a shortage already, and our revenue is already going down. So now this government has also pegged it at 1.6 or 1.8. The only thing that is giving me hope in that line is the recent visit of the president to Saudi Arabia, where Saudi Arabia signed an agreement with Nigeria to invest in oil production in Nigeria. Maybe they are actually relying on Saudi Arabia to come and invest. So maybe when they invest, production will actually go up. Maybe, but I'm not so sure.
But one of the indicators, one of the biggest challenge rather that our production faces is the corruption around it. So do you think we have tackled that to increase our production? Because if you don't tackle that leakages, I don't see how we can even get to a stable 1.83, I think 1.83 million barrels per day.
Because people are just looking at the pegging of the dollar, but they are not even considering the production.
Our biggest, exactly, our biggest revenue.
Yeah, the production is not even there to even meet up that. So definitely we always have shortage in terms of the oil revenue. We always augment it with the non-oil, aspect of the budget. Now talking about, blocking the leakages, the oil thieves in Nigeria. For now, I think the federal government has been able to reduce the stealing. It's not totally eradicated, but it has been reduced to a barest minimum. Now, the question that everybody keeps asking is the people that they caught and the sites that they saw the infrastructure to siphon the oil. Nobody was arrested, nobody was prosecuted.
No naming.
Nobody. Just destroy those infrastructure and then let's continue.
And does that give you a sense that this government is also trying to fight corruption? Because some people are asking for the naming and shaming of these people, arresting, prosecution of these people who have, milked this country of our commonwealth.
Oh yes, I think from the the body language of the president, he has not mentioned anything about fighting corruption per se, apart from when the EFCC boss was actually appointed, and it was not even from the president directly, it was from the president's spokesperson that mentioned, okay, the new EFCC chairman is coming and the mandate given to him is to fight corruption and all that. But apart from that, when the president is speaking in his speech, even talking about his inaugural speech, he didn't really emphasize on corruption. In fact, he didn't even talk about corruption, fighting corruption.
Yeah.
On the June, is Independence Day now, June 12th.
Yes.
Not Independence Day, Democracy Day. Yeah, our Democracy Day, the president's speech did not say anything about fighting corruption. Then the next one was in October, the Independence Day. He didn't talk about fighting corruption. Then when he presented the budget, he never said anything about fighting corruption.
What do you think people are looking at that body language? The past administration went all over town talking about fighting corruption, but you and I know how that went. I don't think they had impressionable landmarks in the fight against corruption. But it's time for a short break. When we return, we'll talk about how corruption, if not held back, would affect the implementation of this beautiful budget according to some quarters. We'll be back after this. This is still Joy Asonye Live. Well, we've been talking about the budget presentation by the president. Thank you so much for coming back to us here as we're discussing all of this. But we had taken the conversation to corruption and how, if corruption is not well tackled, it might defeat the entire process of implementation of this budget. So you were talking about the body language of this administration and this president, this new president. He has not concentrated so much on corruption. But what's the biggest danger if corruption is not tackled? And while his body language or his speeches has not really reflected the fight against corruption, do you think the institutions are just running to ensure that it is indeed curbed? Well,
we have some information from some quarters that is showing that they are not ready to actually toe the line of fighting corruption. We know what happened to the Air Nigeria. Even the minister some few days back started revealing some things about that project. Nobody is arrested. Nobody is being followed up. They just said they are still investigating up till now.
And that concerns you?
Of course, they are still investigating. And
it's not just Hadi, Sirika. There are several others that Nigerians that seems to be glaring in our faces, and Nigerians are like,
I only mentioned one example.
Looking there. Why are you not looking here? And but do you think the fact that one administration, or rather the APC administration, transmitted power to another APC administration, do you think that has affected or will affect the fight against corruption?
No, that shouldn't affect it. The law is there, and anybody that is being caught up with the law should definitely face the sanctions. So it's not about continuity in the administration, but it's about the government ready to sit to do what it's supposed to do, to defend the resources of the nation for the sake of the poor people and all Nigerians. The common slogan of the president again is that let the poor breathe. One way to let the poor breathe is by fighting corruption, because corruption is what is actually suppressing the poor, impoverishing them, and making them slide even more into poverty. Last year, I think there's a data from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics that revealed that about 135 million Nigerians was multidimensionally poor. I think we discussed that on some episode of the program. This has not changed. As soon as subsidy was removed, I think we had more persons slide into that multidimensionally poverty line. So now the president needs to be working tirelessly to see that the pains that Nigerians are feeling now is actually eradicated. Yeah, he said the pains is going to be temporal.
He keeps talking about how temporal the pains are. He's aware of the pains Nigerians are facing. It's like a pregnant woman. You will eventually get relief. We've heard that before. Where do you think the Nigerian perception of this president is, especially after several wonderful speeches? I remember some months ago, a nationwide broadcast. I think that was at the peak of that NLC strike, when the president came up to say he was declaring state of emergency on food insecurity. There was so many plans for the MSMEs, so much Nigerians were waiting for. What do you think Nigerians' perception of this president is?
Well, the president keeps talking about hope. Even the budget is... Somebody talked about it. He said, we probably should not have voted this president based on hope. I mean, we are just hoping. This has been all he's selling, hope. Yes, he needs to sell hope. And the reason why he's selling hope is because he feels that Nigerians have lost hope in government. You know, the successive government have disappointed the country, especially the Nigerians. And then people are feeling that, oh, we don't even know where we are going. Is it getting better or is it getting worse? Now, talking about that, let's go back to the question you asked earlier. I think the problem now is that government will begin to lose trust. The
government or citizens? The
president. The citizens are losing trust in the government.
Right.
President has made several promises. I know what you feel. The pain is temporal and all those stories. Now, if that continues, now 6 months is gone. It's remaining just 3.5. You know, for this administration to go away. And then we talk about the next election.
Next election, I think that's...
Yeah, so if these promises continue to go like this, and then they celebrate 1 year in office by the next 6 months, and then now it's going to be 1 year in office, the president will still be singing, there is hope. After 1 year in office, when you only have 4 years. So I think the president needs to set a deadline for
how long hope should
be.
Exactly.
You know, so that Nigerians will not totally lose hope in his hope mantra. And I think that's what the president needs to do. He needs to give us deadline. I saw on the news today that minimum wage will be paid from
February. Is it February actually?
April 2024.
Right.
From April.
From April. Yeah. And you know, we're expecting it to take effect immediately.
Oh yes, from April. I think the reason why they shifted it to April was because we have this wage award already that the president has promised, and that will run for 6 months. You know, so I think around that February or March, that's when the 6 months will lapse. So that after then, the minimum wage will now take effect. But I think they still need to go back to the negotiation table. We don't know how much this minimum wage is going to be. Labour is asking for 200,000.
Yes, I saw Labour TUC asking for 200,000.
I think the federal government already have an amount in mind, and that's what they want to play to the NLC, but we don't know if that will fly. But they've already budgeted for minimum wage, the new minimum wage to start from April. And these are the indices that makes me feel maybe there is no hope, because if the president or the government is actually planning that we're going to begin to produce petrol in Nigeria, and diesel, aviation fuel, and all that, kerosene, I believe that the prices of this energy should come down. And when the price of energy comes down, it will give our currency more value. And then there might be no need for you to increase minimum wage. But if you are not talking about increasing minimum wage, then it means I don't think they are planning that the price of fuel, even despite producing locally, will go below 500 naira per litre.
So you're right. They're not having the ambition. The ambition you are even having, they don't even have that ambition. But we've spoken so much about what the government can do and all of that. Let's talk about the agricultural sector, another non-oil sector that has the potential of, you know, contributing so much to our GDP. What do you think this government should start doing beyond these beautiful digits, you know, on this proposed budget? What do you think is necessary to be done and done right away?
Oh yes, I applauded the administration when I saw the 2023 supplementary budget, which is still running. I saw the Agri Ministry taking a very good chunk, I think about 600 billion or thereabout. And when I look at the breakdown of the budget, I saw plans for dry season farming. We are now in the dry season. We are expecting to see production in the dry season. The dry season farming, you know, takes place more in the north and in the south, and then that means government has budgeted for production of some agricultural products even in the dry season, not just in the rainy season. So we're expecting to see a boost in that sector. That is if government actually, you know, spend those funds in line with what was budgeted for. You know, that's another different thing. That's why we talked about the corruption. So if government spends that supplementary budget, before we even talk about the 2024 budget, then we're expecting to see significant improvements in the agricultural sector. That sector needs to be revived. It has more potentials, even more than the oil sector.
Exactly.
It has more potentials to create jobs for people, the teeming unemployed youth in Nigeria. So if government can focus on that and then boost that sector, the multiple chain in that sector alone is enough to, you know, keep all our youths busy with more than a job.
Exactly. However, it seems like they're oblivious of what to do. I remember speaking with an agricultural expert who raised some concerns that this, even when you say I want to give you fertilizers, before these fertilizers come, the farmers have long gone far in farming season. Some of them have to sell it off because, you know, it's not necessary for them at the moment. So it seems like proper needs assessment is never really done and all of that. But is there a role citizens can play to just, you know, nudge this government? We can't complain about the same old things over and over and over.
Yeah, I think what the citizens need to do, especially, is to still come together as association. We have different associations in the agri sector. We have the Livestock Farmers Association, we have Seedlings Association, Rice Farmers. All those associations, they need to come together and then make all their challenges known. Pass it through the National Assembly, and then possibly also lay their complaints through the Ministry of Agriculture to see that all these challenges are actually met. There are solutions to these problems. It is solvable. The challenges is surmountable. But it's just the willingness to do so by government. That's what we need to get. And the citizens can continue to press. They don't need to give up on pressing up with their demands from the government. That's why government is there. They are there for the citizens and then not just for themselves. So when the citizens are pressing that this is what we need, this is how we want, you know, things to be done, they don't need to give up on that. They need to continue to press and press until they get whatever they want from government.
This budget gave the security sector the lion's share of of the budget. However, we've seen the corruption that often characterizes, you know, that security sector. It had a ripple effect, especially in the 2023 year. It had a ripple effect on the agricultural sector, where farmers couldn't even go to the farm because they were afraid for their lives. There were some who had, in fact, in some communities, had structured payments, taxes that bandits will come get, otherwise they will kidnap and cause mayhem. You know, in spite of all these monies that are being put into the security sector, what is indeed happening?
Oh yes, I think that is one sector or one area that I can give this government a credit. We've seen kidnapping business go down. Before now, kidnapping used to be on the pages of newspaper every day. Either they are kidnapping the priests, or they are kidnapping students, or they are kidnapping farmers and all that. But I think since this administration came on board, I think kidnapping has actually gone down. It has reduced, though not totally eradicated, but it has you know, gone down very well. I can give them that credit. And I think people are going to farm now. I think what was actually planted for this last 3 months, we're expecting to see a lot of harvest from the farms, because there was a relative peace in the country. You know, the kidnappers were off the roads and the bushes, just, you know, skirmishes here and there that we saw. So on that sector, I think this administration have a credit, but we still hope that they will also do more. Quickly too, what I saw in the supplementary budget under security, you know, the supplementary budget is still running and they plan to do so much with 2 trillion within 2 months.
Yes.
So we want to see the effects of this supplementary budget before we even talk about excuse me, the implementation of the 2024 budget. In this supplementary budget, it was budgeted that the police will recruit about 10,000 policemen.
More policemen.
This is 1st of December. I've not heard any announcements for the police recruitment, so I'm still waiting.
Well,
you know, because when they recruit more, that will also give assurance. You know, the number of a policeman to citizen is still very, very, you know, much. One policeman is, I think, is estimated to be covering
police about
100
you mean with the reality or
yeah,
the UN
reality,
standard?
The reality now on ground in Nigeria, the gap, and I believe that's why the president and the security chief, they are saying that they want to withdraw the policemen from the VIPs so that they can go secure the citizens.
And even that, I can tell you, has not been done, because I looked around and I saw policemen still manning posts, or rather following the VIPs everywhere. I saw even people I cannot even consider VIP being police, and I cannot for the life of me understand why you know we need to put we have just about 440 men on the boots on the ground. And in all of that, a certain percentage of Nigerians have so many following them about, and I could not for the life of me understand why you will be comfortable knowing you have 5 policemen around your compound. Your wife wants to go to the market, there's a policeman following her, and all of that. But Nigerians do not have enough policemen.
Yeah, I think that's why they came up with the withdrawal of the policemen from the VIPs.
But whatever happens, when it comes to these small, you know, seemingly small policies that would reflect, it's not a fiat. Every other thing can happen in a day. However, this one that can, you know, translate to having having the people have that breath. This president keeps saying, let the poor breathe. When it comes to when it comes to these little things that the Nigerians can see as indices to say, okay, this administration is serious about what they say, we don't see it manifest. What's going on?
Yeah, you know, we are talking about VIPs here. These VIPs are big politicians, whether in the ruling party or the opposition party, and they have enough funds to actually pay, you know, for these services from the police.
Why don't you get private security?
Yeah, private securities are not licensed to carry arms. So those are the
you know what it reminds me of?
But I think if the government can recruit more men, let's have more men. If we can achieve that 10,000 recruitment of policemen, and then they get them trained, we'll have more men to police the country.
But before we leave this police matter, somebody had said if the VIPs must have the police, they should handle their salaries for the time frame. Do you think that will work?
That cannot work because police is under the exclusive list of the federal government.
Yes, but if your contribution to having a security detail or the many security men that you need, if you contribute their salary to that one.
Yeah, I think what they pay is as high as that. What you pay to get a policeman to guide you up and down is actually high too, but they can afford it.
But have we gotten to a stage where we should revisit that conversation on private security? As long as you can regulate them, you're sure that they have that training, they are not trigger happy, they can also hold arms, just like I see in other countries.
Well, I don't think that would be good for us because in our country already now we have small arms and ammunition already proliferated within the society, and government is trying to mop them out. So if you now say, okay, let the private people also be carrying guns and all that, it might get out of control. So I think it's still good for government to control it within the ambit of the police.
Still talking about security, that seem to have like a very important role to even see the implementation of this budget. We need to feel secured. The conversation around vigilante, what's your thought on it?
That's the community policing.
Somewhat, but that's not what people think of it. That's somewhat what people think when they think of community policing. But there's also already a structure. I know you see them in communities, you see that they are already doing their bit, but that recognition necessary from the federal government that recognizes them as a security architecture of government.
Oh yes, government recognizes them. In fact,
when it comes to joint task force,
the states have the rights to actually make their laws. That's what we saw Amotekun in the southwest. Amotekun is a form of community policing, and I've listened to Falana SAN talk about that extensively, that those community policies, the state government have the right to approach the federal government and ask for licenses for these community policemen. That's the vigilantes. So it's the prerogative of the state to secure their people by also coming up with community policing. That's the vigilantes. We also have that in Benue. The past Benue state governor also inaugurated a kind of a vigilante group, and then he can approach the federal government and say, okay, give me license for 50 persons among all the community policies so that they can use it to secure our people. The states, and that must pass through the State House of Assembly, before the governor can go ahead to do that. So it's actually good, and that is the way to go. Everyone has already said that is the way to go, because we don't have enough policemen to secure and police the entire country. So the community policing is actually the way to go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ogunsola, for being part of this program. It's always wonderful to have you, because you have this way of touching everything. Of touching everything, every sector. You seem very in-depth in all of that. But thank you for being part of Asonye Live.
Thank you.
Right. We've been discussing with Akintunde Ogunsola, an economic expert. We've been dissecting the just presented budget, 2024 appropriation budget from the federal government. But this is where we round it up on Asonye Live. Have a wonderful weekend, as I am hoping to rest myself so that I'll be back energized on Monday for so much more. So have a wonderful weekend.